Ladies and gentlemen, good day. This is one of the most important events in IAM, International Aftermarket meeting, because we think that an exhibition is not only a place in which we exhibit product, but is a place in which is possible to exchange ideas, exchange best practice, and I think that this is one of the most important things that we have to do in face-to-face, finally, in Autopromotech. Thanks to ANFIA, to the president, to the secretary, and of course also Andrea, that help us to that organize this event. Thank you to CLEPA, and in particular Mr. Schlehuber, that help us in the scientific, involvement for this meeting. And I leave the stage to Mr. Massimo Pellegrino, the ANFIA Aftermarket Coordinator. Thank you.
Now it's working. Good morning, and first of all, thank you very much to stay here with us in Bologna in Autopromotech. For me, it's a real pleasure to see all of you, colleagues, customers, but first of all, friends. After more than two difficult years, now we are all together, and for me, it's a real pleasure. My name is Massimo Pellegrino. I'm in charge for the aftermarket of ANFIA. I also a professional role in a global player automotive company that the name is ZF. More than 24 years in the business. Just a short overview of our organization. ANFIA is one of the most important trade company in Italy, is part of Confindustria, and is in charge to support all automotive companies in Italy. We are more than 400 companies. We are divided in three main groups. First is component, the second is the part related to vehicle, and the third is car design and R&D. ANFIA Aftermarket is part of the component group. In ANFIA Aftermarket there are there are 6 groups that are fully dedicated to the business. We are supporting the whole aftermarket in Italy, starting from components to the distribution and then to the installer. We are in 6 groups. In these 6 groups, there are 5 historical groups. The first is market and web market. The second is product and quality. The third is truck and bus business. Then there is the group related to the relationship with buying groups, distributors, and others actors of our field. Then there is a part for us really important that is related to the training and communication. Then there is a new group. This new group is fully dedicated to the new aftermarket, because we know very well that the automotive business is moving in a different way, in a new world, and inside the ANFIA Aftermarket we are created this new group fully dedicated to the new aftermarket. Just some bullet point. In these years, we are facing some main issue. All of you are part of the market and know very well the current situation. The current situation is this. We have a big issue in terms of raw material related to the cost. Then there is a chip shortage since years, and for the next 1 or 2 years, we have to manage this situation. Obviously, we are thinking about 50 to 55. Obviously, for us is a real disruption, but we have to understand this new regulation because it's obviously a risk, but is also an opportunity. New mobility. The cars are changing, are becoming more computer, more phone than the historical car with the 4 wheels. The know-how is really important because in particular the installer needs to understand the future of the aftermarket, the future of the parts, and the future also of their know-how. New player in the market, new intermediates. There are fleets, insurance, pure web player. Also in this case, we have to manage this relationship with a complete different approach. We have to think. I'm closing my short speech, but I would like to put on the table on some fact. First of all, Italian car park. Currently, the average of age is more than 10 years. Currently, less than 2% of the current car park is related to new mobility, is related to electrical, full electric, hybrid, mild hybrid. Another point that for us is vital for the future of our business. The whole supply chain should be more cohesive. We have to stay together. A clear understanding of the risk, of the opportunities of the next year is mandatory. We cannot stay alone waiting for someone. We have to manage the risk because the risk will become opportunities. Then, clear, someone will exit of our business. Why? Because the new technologies are increasing, are arriving, and we have to understand all the chain, or all the ring of the chain should understand their new role in the distribution. Last point, the whole aftermarket have to exploit all opportunities because the lighthouse of the future is to understand better the full new aftermarket. Now, many thanks again. I pass the ball, the virtual ball, to Nicola Morzenti, partner of Roland Berger for the automotive business. Again, thank you here in Bologna. Grazie.
Thank you, Massimo, and really a pleasure to be here. So long time without a physical event. I'm not even sure to be able to take the speech not with a Teams. No? I think in the next 25 minutes we have a big ambition to go over some of the points already raised by Massimo. Of course, we will touch some of them. Not sure we will be able to clear all the topics. There are a lot. First of all, as a Roland Berger, we are, I hope most of you know us, we are a major consultancy company, especially in the automotive, supporting big companies, top management, entrepreneur, and also investor in understanding business plan, strategic issues. So always very keen to the future challenges. And of course, here we have some of the new challenges that we have on the market that we see that are different from the previous 15 years. So we have a completely different macroeconomic environment, Ukraine, inflation, and so on. We will speak later. We have the overarching trend, which is not news, of course, digitalization, electrification, but that now are going quicker and quicker to have an impact, and competitive trends. So aftermarket has always been famous to be more resilient, to be more stable, but now these new entrants are also disrupting the competition and changing the rules. Very, very quickly, we all know that the automotive environment is not positive. Every 6 months, we have a new reprojection from IHS, from different secondary sources, with a lower and lower expectation in terms of sales. Of course, if we look at the next 5 years, still the slope of the projection of sales is increasing. But if we look just in the last 12 months, we had a projection over the next 5 years of minus 50 million vehicle sale. And this is, as a paradox, not really a paradox, benefiting for the aftermarket, because at the end we see on the right part of the page still a growing car park, and most of all with an significantly increasing aging of this car park, with an obvious benefit for the aftermarket and especially the independent aftermarket. Us as a Roland Berger, we do regular projection and we still see a positive growth. It's interesting to see that based on during the pandemic, the car sales trend was minus 20% and the aftermarket was able to limit by minus 13%. In the next 2 years, we still envisage plus 7% as a growth. And also in the following 3 years, we still see a growth. With a mix in terms of category, of segment, which is quite stable. Of course, there is a lower suffering the tire segment, while the maintenance and repair are more or less stable in the mix. What is more important, as I said before, is that differently from the last 15 years, which were a continuous regular growth of the aftermarket and of the independent aftermarket, that growth was mostly driven by increase of sales, by increased quality of professionalization of the independent aftermarket, aging of the car park, and product part complexity, the importance to have a broad product portfolio. All issues and challenges that were in your agenda in the last 10-15 years and also today. From now on, we see the rules of the competition changing a lot, with digitalization and electrification now really entering in the hot part of the implementation, being a key success factor also for the automotive aftermarket. And even more, as Massimo mentioned at the beginning, the increasing role of new entrants, which now after 5-10 years are not even more new entrants, but really player that the traditional historical company need to compete with. So just to say that within still a positive growth that we see in the aftermarket, the independent aftermarket, looking ahead, need to answer to different challenges. So we put a question mark to see if this is going still to increase in terms of power. As a fact, we see every day on the newspaper, we see average margin of aftermarket player. Here is, of course, a panel with both manufacturer and distributors that in the last 4 years continuously reduced. We don't have yet official data on the 2022, but we expect that the average performance is going to decrease for all what we are going to discuss after, but both inflation, macroeconomic, and overarching trend. So going step by step, let's start with, unfortunately, what is under our eyes still, and unfortunately that is seems that is not going to be solved quickly. So Ukraine, Russia is impacting all the macroeconomic, even more for automotive. And what we see is two types of effect. One more as a short term that is under our eyes already now in terms of vehicle production cut, some prudence from the end customer postponing the purchasing of new vehicle. In the mid-term, we see still some issue on the production plan of the OEMs for some shortage on the supply chain. And also in terms of final demand, the Russia, some countries that are going to suffer, not just in the next month, but on a more longer path. We know what it is, no? The impact is both energy, chemicals, metals. This is the ratio of, in terms of ratio of export of Ukraine and Russia compared to the requirement of the automotive. Apart from the share, what is important is what is the trend of each material. Because you could see, for example, oil and gas, we know it's impacting across all the domain, all the company. If we go to the metals, nickel seems to be quite limited, the impact. On the other side, we all know that nickel is booming in terms of demand, so probably as a single effect is one of the worst. And the critical components we know, first wiring harness, then electronic products, semiconductor for the lack of gas for the processes. No? We try to split the impact, and what we see is, first of all, as I said before, on the Y, short-term and long-term impact. On the other side, the impact more on the price, on the margin, or impact on the material availability, material flow interruption. What we see, palladium and neon as potentially the most disruptive, with the most impact. On the other side, as I mentioned quickly before, nickel, apart from the 12% of share of Russia and Ukraine, we see it as a mid-term issue compared to the higher and higher demand of this kind of metal. Oil is still on the, of course, on the price impact. We put as a short term. We hope that the macroeconomics and politicians will try to solve out this at least and avoid the huge peak we experienced. Still coming on prices, we know that energy and rubber are expected to grow. It's not a news. What is important to see is that this is an additional growth that we see compared to 1 year and a half growth that the market, were experiencing already. So this is an additional hurdle for the margin and for keeping the profitability. And coming back to the volume, to the production, we see the monthly production, month by month, with the delta, with the variation compared to the expectation. Big of the impact, you see March, April is already actual data. We envisage in July already still some issue at the OEM plant, given that especially on wiring there could be some stoppage, no? So, and this is something that the market need to get used. Is already unfortunately used, given the lack of semiconductor. So plan of the OEMs are going to be more and more volatile. Plans not just of the OEMs. And this is going to continue. We see at the end of the year the situation actually to be solved mostly. So as a quick summary, what we see is, of course, high uncertainty and demand, which is going to create more and more volatile and uncertain production planning. Risk of stock out, with a lot of focus needed on the supply chain to secure existing relationship. Availability and unstable supply chain we mentioned. Inflation is a huge topic, and not all the business, not all the price list are really reflecting with a pass-through mechanism. So this could be really disruptive for the end-of-year margin, and the pressure on margin also related to inflation, but more in general to this need to find some room for protection. No? So all the relationship across the value chain are going to become more tough. Quickly on the overarching automotive trend, overall we don't see changes in the path that was set, apart from the never-ending discussion about electrification, digitalization. But if we make a quick summary, we still see a park growth, as we said at the beginning, and with an increasing aging, with an obvious benefit for the aftermarket. And we see the increasing the age is going more in the comfort of the independent aftermarket. So this is going to be, as a positive impact, even more for independent aftermarket. This is how to read the page. On the other side, the mileage of the average mileage of the car is decreasing. Even after COVID, the new habits, smart working is going to decrease. So at least part of the aftermarket parts and requirement are going to suffer. And this is, we think, the same for independent and for the OE channel. Vehicle part complexity is an ongoing trend that we still confirm. It's positive because the average part price is higher than in the past. Electrification and digitalization, we spend some more time on this. But as a very quick summary, electrification is an issue because the vehicle architecture is going to be much more simplified with an average price of the component higher, but with a replacement rate that is different from the typical engine, IC engine. No? Digitalization even more potentially critical. This is still, let me say, an open book, no? Because regulations still need to take a clear position, and of course is still a strong fight OE versus aftermarket to who keep the information, who is able to generate revenue and benefit from that. Quickly on the car park, we saw before is still a growing car park. It's interesting to see, even compared to 10 years ago, less than 10 years ago, 5 percentage points more of vehicles are aged more than 8 years. And let me say, this is our standard segmentation. Now, as a Roland Berger, we are evaluating to go and add 13 years, because since 3 years ago, that was really a very niche and then end-of-life business. But now we expect that in the next 10 years could be relevant and could require a different value proposition for the aftermarket. At the same time, as you see, on a global level, compared to 2 years ago, minus 5% in terms of average mileage, with a bigger peak on decrease in North America, but also in Europe. So even after the low peak of during the pandemic, even the new normal is still with a lower mileage. In terms of projection, continuously changing, no? And also affected by Fit for 55, which was recently confirmed, at least as an ambition. We see that by 2030, 30% will be fully electric, but still with 33% with ICE, traditional vehicle. But the situation, of course, driven by the regulation 2035, in 2040 is completely different. So this is reflecting to the car park evolution. Let me summarize. There is still time for the aftermarket on the electrification, because the evolution toward a full electric is going to be delayed at least 10, 15 years. So even in 2030, 60% of the vehicle will be pure ICE plus 30% hybrid, so with still some thermal management and requirement. As a quick summary from the typical ICE vehicle and pure battery vehicle, the point is that the overall value of components in a ICE is in a BEV vehicle is higher, but with a much different mix. So, for example, you have battery pack, thermal management, inverter that are, we say, winner components, with an increasing trend. On the other side, diesel, turbocharger, piston are, of course, components that we're going to suffer. We have an estimate that at least in the powertrain, we come from 1,400 components and we decrease to 200 components. Obviously, the headline is switched. If we come on the connected vehicle, the situation is quite different. So it seems something that we talk about less than the electrification. On the other side, the growth of connected vehicle is much more dramatic. And in less than 8 years, in 2030, basically all the vehicles that will be sold are already so-called connected vehicle, which can be different kind of connectivity, vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to cloud. So, but in general, able to communicate with other vehicles. And also the impact on the car park is very, very quick. So in less than 8 years, we will have a car park. You will have a car park to manage with 50% of vehicle able to communicate, to send data, diagnostic, telematics, or CAN bus data, whatever. So able to change the value proposition for the aftermarket, especially for repairers and the network. Here we see, of course, there are different kind of data, diagnostics so on the pure vehicle condition, telematics on the kind of habits of the driver, and finally components and CAS bus integration, which are really a step below in terms of integration of ECU, battery management system, and so on. Each kind of data have a different relevance for different type of player. It's clear that diagnostic data are key much more for the workshops, because this could help workshop to improve their service and understand their service level. On the other side, also for supplier, would be interesting and essential to have full access on those data to improve the development of current parts, no? And improve the offering for current parts as a differentiator part. On telematics, this is still important, especially for supplier and workshop. Let me say even more for supplier, to accelerate and improve the development of new parts, no? Understand which part are related, the consumption and the substitution to which kind of habits of the driver. And finally, for the component and CAS band, probably this is important, but the impact much more limited to the supplier for electronics and mechatronics supplier. No? If we look forward, this is still the future scenario is really all too set, no? And is a fact that today the data is in the hand of the car maker. The usage of those data is limited, also given the privacy regulation and so on, but really not visible to the other stakeholder in the value chain. What will be the scenario? At least to help the discussion, we depicted 3 potential evolution. One is let me say, scenario 1, the OEM, the car maker winning, no? So being able to influence the regulation and keeping the full control of data. And of course, lock in all the value potentially generated by this kind of data. Scenario 2, a mixed control with some diagnostic data that are accessible to the IAM player, some other no. Scenario 3 is open source, so with the data fully available to the all kind of player. Here we are not saying which is more likely, because it's really challenging, and as we write, it will also depend from the car maker moves, but also the regulation playing a key role. What is sure is that connected vehicle is an opportunity at the end. Is an opportunity potentially increasing the value of the market and the aftermarket. So that market full potential means that more the data likely will be open source, open to the aftermarket stakeholder, and will be largely used, more the impact could be on the aftermarket. So this is clear, and this hopefully will be a driver also for regulators and institutions. Finally, on the competitive trend, it's well known, this kind of curve, no? On the first and second segment, especially the first, there is the aftermarket is basically locked by the car maker, and then more aged the vehicle, more the aftermarket is gaining market share. At the end, looking at the last 5 years, the OEM, even just looking at the margin, no? The margin of the aftermarket compared to the overall margin of the OEM, there is a huge profit pool they want to address. They are already doing, not today, already since at least 5 years, with new offering, extended warranty, new products, second life products. So trying to be more and more competitive also on the older vehicle. And now this is the second point. More recently, we see them being even more aggressive in terms of network and building up their own sales channel and entering really into the arena, which historically was for the independent aftermarket. These are just a few examples to show that of initiative in the last few years of OEMs working to enter into the independent or addressing that part of the market, both on the manufacturing side, so production, part production, on the distribution, which can be marketplace or dealer, and directly to the workshop. So this is not a news, but traditional player, the car maker, with that are putting more pressure on independent aftermarket, and this is one. The second is the long-lasting key takeaway of the consolidation, but still we see in Europe, especially, a huge potential of consolidation, even compared to the US, which for at least for aftermarket is a far above Europe. So we see room for consolidation, and this is going to change even more the kind of competition and the relative power in the negotiation. And finally, probably even the most important, the demand is changing. So less and less is demand from the private, more and more is the way you sell the vehicle as a leasing with a financing, and even more the way you use the mobility as a service. Car as a service and mobility as a service, which in the last 10 years triggered the entrance of this new player, which as a Tesla case study, entering from scratch in this very mature business, were able to interpret it and address the market in a more innovative way. What is true, then you can find different players with different business model, but the common thing we see is that they require end-to-end support. So end-to-end supplier to simplify their core business. So from vehicle supply, vehicle financing, vehicle insurance, maintenance, fleet management. This is going to be more and more important to have a bundle offering. And from a traditional aftermarket arena with this four players, no? Part manufacturer, car manufacturer, workshop, and wholesaler. Now we have a much more complex arena with, we call it intermediates, which intermediate the final demand. Can be the fleet, with a buying group, with insurance company entering. With a potential profit pool that could decrease for the higher competition, with a revenue pool that can increase. So the overall market, and I refer back to the page we discussed at the very beginning, that we see an overall increasing market, is increasing, but with more competitors, with more players playing for the same profit pool. So with a higher challenge at least for the incumbent. Once again, just as an example, no, Amazon and Alibaba, if we look back at the last 15 years, it's clear that they initially entered just on the B2C. They started on the do-yourself or do-it-for-me for the tire, and then now they are entering really also with agreement with the PSA, with the car maker, which even just 5 years ago was, you could see really on the opposite of the arena. No? And this is how we see the evolution. So looking back at a different demand, asking for more integrated services, also the bank affiliates or the OEM captive bank, which historically were more keen and focused on financing, are moving into a full service leasing as the new demand are requiring more and more. So here there is not independent aftermarket traditional player. So we see what is the right to play, what is the role that could play. At the end of the game, the dealer, the network is in the hand of workshops. Capillarity is still playing a role, and parts supply is in the hand of technology is the same. No? So the point is really to find a way to address this emerging market and find agreement with this growing part of the business. To summarize, we see here you can find the main challenge and the recommendation for the different topic. Each one has a different impact on the different player. You could see that the readiness is the dark blue, and less ready is white. You could see, even just without reading all the challenges, that our view is that suppliers are probably the players more into the disruption and need to change, because they are very much linked to the heritage of 1 century of working with a stable supply chain, and now changing, especially in terms of, if you look at upskilling, service enlargement, because digitalization is going to push new kind of competence, and M&A. Some of the M&A will be linked and will be driven by the giant, but some other is also should be addressed proactively. And so that is the picture we see. Is as a really final remarks. Positive news: the market is still growing. Positive news: the revenue pool is growing, is going to grow, and digitalization in each whatever will be the scenario is going to grow. Competition is changing, and profit pool are under pressure. There are levers, given the underlying market, that is positive, to still keep on the market and find the way to be successful. That's it. I'm available for first to let you think with the panelists now talking about the topic, and eventually also after to clarify some of the topic. Thank you. I let Frank Schlehuber from CLEPA to moderate. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that deep insight into the aftermarket and the nuts and bolts of that business. My name is Frank Schlehuber. I will moderate the next session. I look back to a 30 years career with Bosch, always in the aftermarket, in different parts of the world, in Japan, in US, and my last role was global sales independent aftermarket. Since 5 years, I'm supporting as an independent consultant CLEPA. CLEPA is the European arm of ANFIA, to say that here. CLEPA represents the suppliers in Brussels and versus all institutions. CLEPA has about 120 members and 14 national associations. We should not forget that suppliers represent about 75% of the value of a car. So we have heard a lot about aftermarket at the moment, and in my takeaway from that session here with Nicola, yeah, he is convinced we get a growth. There's nothing would change immediately. And also interesting to see that you see the independent aftermarket still taking shares from OEMs in the aftermarket. These questions will be discussed later on. We also learned that electrification is rapidly growing, but only in 8 years from now, about 40% in the car having a battery. I think this triggers some questions regarding who are the mechanics working on such cars. Also your statement, less replaceable parts, but more expensive parts. And then OEMs and new market players are entering that market. This means our business environment will change. Fleet and e-commerce will gain relevance, also one of your statements. And then last but not least, what we see in the daily press, suppliers are under distress regarding whatever COVID or Ukraine or closed harbors in China. I think that's all coming at the moment a little bit too heavy on our industry. So with that short summary of what we heard, I want to open the next session and ask on stage Ruggero Semola. We learned this morning that we started in the same building around 88, I 90, in the same building at Bosch in Karlsruhe, our careers. And he was in marketing, I was in service. And thanks for being with us today. He's today aftermarket EMEA director at Dayco, but he has made a lot of, has held a lot of different positions in the industry. And yeah, with ITT, Conti, Valeo Group, then Group Auto also, and since 2019, you are now representing the interests of Dayco.
Thank you, Frank, for this introduction. In fact, it has been a great pleasure to be introduced by a person who went through a huge career, starting from the same office as me, so it's nice to meet each other today again. Thank you for that. Today, as you anticipated, I'm representing the company Dayco, who has a more than 100-year story in this market. The mission of Dayco is to research, project, produce, and distribute power transmission products, particularly known belts and tensioners, dedicated to the automotive business, cars and heavy duty, but also on constructions, on agriculture and industrial business. The company, as you can see here, is a global one, is a company with about 3,600 people, with production in all the continents. And what is today particularly valuable is the fact that outside the 15 production sites we have, 4 of them are located in Italy. And with the actual geopolitical changes, is a high value we can offer for the European market. What is important for us is that our more or less 1 billion revenue is very well distributed on the two opposite sides of the Atlantic. So we are very well positioned in Europe as in the Americas, with the potential growth in Asia Pacific, and following also what our Roland Berger friend presented now, is for us very important to have a share of the aftermarket which is about 50% of our total turnover. It means that in a moment when the market is rebalancing the demand between the two areas, OE and aftermarket, we are able in these ways to compensate the demand in a very balanced way. Our challenge today, I want to say, is absolutely supply chain. Today, the world which is constantly changing, intercept demand and combine it with the product availability is a very complex challenge. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ruggero, for this introduction of Dayco. Our next panelist today is Ferdinando Imhof. Thanks for being with us today. Ferdinando is Chief Product Officer at LKQ Europe. He is since 1996 with the RIA Group and was responsible for marketing and purchasing. He was also chairman and CEO of Bertolotti and RIA Switzerland, and is now based in Switzerland representing LKQ at their headquarters. Ferdinando, a short introduction also from your side, please.
Thank you, Frank. LKQ is by far the biggest spare part distributor in Europe, with a real pan-European footprint covering 20 different countries. A revenue over $6 billion already in 2021, 26,000 employees. From our 1,000 branches, we are serving daily over 10,000 franchise workshops and 100,000 independent workshops, supplying over 900,000 SKUs and offering on our digital systems 2.5 million of different parts. LKQ, as you might know, belongs to a much bigger American group with headquarters in Chicago, and Europe represents currently 40% of the global revenue of the entire group. That means quite a substantial piece. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So our third panelist today is Sergio Metelli, CEO of the Metelli Group, same name. Sergio is since 1995 a second generation entrepreneur in the Metelli Group, has made his career through a variety of different positions, and you also have experience with working in different parts of Europe. From that side, you are a real insider of the European aftermarket. Sergio, short introduction from your side.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I am very proud to be here since we are a family company. So among these panelists of a multinational company, we are a mosquitoes, but we play our game. Our company is a family-owned company in the sense that it is owned by a family. My family, together with my two brothers, I manage the company. We are celebrating this year the 60s of our company that has been started by my father. We produce 5 product line, which is engine parts, all the braking, transmission, coolings, and a die casting product by our aluminum die casting foundry. We work mainly for the independent aftermarket. 90% of our turnover is dedicated to the aftermarket, so we are in the right place. But 10% it is dedicated to the OEM, and we are strengthening our relationship with them very much in the last years, because we need to stay in contact with them to understand what will be the vehicle of the future. We have been awarded with the 5 new water pumps for very effective vehicles that are currently running on the road. So we are proud to be here. Our challenges for the today and for the future are the transition between mechanical and electrical spare parts, mainly in the cooling system, and the improving of the supply chain that today is very difficult. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And our last open chair is dedicated and open for Olivier Pontreau, Retail Director at Motrio. Motrio is the independent aftermarket division of Renault. He started his career in '99 with Mack Trucks, has spent 10 years with the Renault Trucks and another 10 years with Bosch, and was most of the time responsible for workshop networks. And we wanted to have workshop networks also on stage today. Happy to welcome you, and the stage is yours for a short introduction.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you for having me here with you, and happy and proud to be the voice of the workshops today. So just a few words about Motrio. Motrio is three things, I would say. Network, Motrio is spare parts and distribution, and solutions. So network powered by a strong car manufacturer, Renault, and 25 years of experience. So we were sort of pioneer as a car manufacturer to enter into the IAM. And I think that what we've seen earlier today has proven that we have made the right choice. We have today 2,500 point of sales workshops in the world, mostly focused in Europe. And the ambition to become one of the top 3 network in Europe in the IAM, with new brand platform, farming with the current network, developing partnerships and implementing new business models, such as Motrio Mobile. On the parts range, ambitions to multiply by 4 the parts range. So we have started this year already with the new tire range, the Fairway tire range that we actually tested with TÜV Süd, and with outstanding results, both all-season, winter and summer range, new battery range, new oil range, and the ambitions then, I was saying, to reach a portfolio of 33,000 parts, covering 80% of the part range. And in the solutions part, because we also have a digital arm within the Motrio business unit, we look at repair and maintenance information, marketplace, as well as developing mobility as a service. The ambitions there also is to develop new touch points, new digital touch points with the B2C and the B2B with a full integrated approach. So I'll take my seat, and I guess that we were all supposed to answer the question about what's the challenge of the future for us, for me. And we all know that electrification will touch us very strongly. We have more time on the IAM, but it's somehow something that we can see coming. What I see as most disruptive that could happen and will happen at some point is the disruption of the new entrants that maybe are not today player in the IAM, in the automotive market, and maybe we'll see the Uber or the Deliveroo of car service coming at some time, and there will be a flipping point where all the logics will change. So we need to be prepared for that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the statement. And with that, we will open the discussion today. Looking forward to a real discussion about topics. And before we start to go into the new challenging topics, maybe a short look back to the last 2 years under COVID. And maybe we start with Sergio. And how did your company really go through the crisis at COVID? And what is your outlook until 2025? Let's take a short period here.
As for everybody, it was a big challenge. It was a challenge because we were very much concerned about the health of our workers, as for everybody. we felt to be responsible for them. So we have introduced all the procedure that everybody of you knows about COVID in order to protect our colleagues, our employees, which are the heart of our company, of course. But in the same time, we kept our connection with the customer, with the supplier, in order to try to understand and to imagine and to focus on different scenarios. Being a family company, we are strong in taking fast decisions, since I have to decide with my two brothers, and so we can go ahead without involving too much time. So we took the decision to keep the company running, to keep the level of inventory very high, in order to be prepared to service the market once the situation of COVID should have been better. And I would say that at the very beginning we were worried because everybody were closed. But at the end, our service was very high when the situation was improving, and the customer realized it. They gave us trust, and so we took advantage of our choices. But again, in a period where it was very challenging to take a decision and to take risks. But we took. The forecast for the future, I agree with what Roland Berger survey was. But simply because the average age of the car park will increase in the coming years, and so potentially there is an increasing of market for the independent aftermarket, but we are already seeing some changes, because there will be changes, and some we are already verifying due to technical circumstances, which is different vehicles, different technology to provide the service in the aftermarket, and also due to commercial challenges, because there are distributor grouping together, different entrants, but we will talk later. So we will have in front of us a lot of challenges, but as everybody, we have to take decision even in an uncertain world. So if I think about those days, I think that we were forced to give certainties in an uncertain world. Thank you.
This means courageous decisions took you through the crisis, and you see the world realistically now, changing and making preparations. Olivier, how did the workshop environment perceive the last 2 years? Were there consumers looking for more affordable repairs, or how did the workshop level see that?
Well, I think there was a big hit with the first wave of lockdown, and the IAM workshops have been suffering as everybody. But I think here again, in that crisis, they have proven resilience even more than the authorized workshops, because they're more flexible, smaller, they can adapt. So all in all, probably they have been resisting a bit better than the rest of the market and recovering. I think that the COVID might have increased slightly or proceeded with the weight of the IAM in the maintenance, in the car service. But more than the pandemic, I guess that the raw material increase and the price inflation that we'll be facing, that will be a boost even bigger than the pandemic for that trend.
Yeah, thanks for this insight here. Maybe one question directly to you, to that topic. Was it an advantage to operate within a workshop network? Did you see this as an advantage, or more a ballast because you have to follow certain rules and dependencies?
I think being part of a network is really an advantage for workshops. In their everyday life, to support them, to help them grow, and to focus on their business and leave it to the franchise network to work on marketing, on preparation of the technical training and everything that they don't have to think about. But in the pandemic time, I think that has also helped the workshops to feel part of a community, to be able to exchange on their difficulties, to participate into online trainings initiatives or all kinds of initiatives that have taken place thanks to the head of franchise, yes.
Mm-hmm. wholesalers had probably a complete different experience in the pandemic. On one side, you suffered from volatile supply chains. Maybe your suppliers told you that they have to deal with plant shutdowns, logistic issues, and on the other side, you had a very volatile market and consumer behavior. And Ferdinando, how did you perceive the crisis, and what was your way through it?
Well, Frank, thank you for the question. For sure, COVID was a strong hit, but on the other hand, I think we should a little bit shift the focus, and generally speaking, it's the blend of different trends that really made and is making our life difficult, because we have the base industry trend like, I don't know, electrification or car connectivity we mentioned several times already today. We have the new social behaviors or expectations. We have end consumers starting to consider the car only a service, looking for new channels with a new green vision, a new legal framework with all this push on sustainability, CO2 reduction. And then, last but not least, the humanitarian challenges like the unfortunately persistent pandemic, because from a distributor point of view, this is hitting us very heavily even today, because you know that China is again in lockdown, and so this is cutting some of our sources, or unfortunately the new ground war in Europe in Ukraine. So everything blended leads me only to one possible answer. So you need to be holistic, you need to be proactive, and you need to be agile to survive this blend of challenges. Notwithstanding, you are a distributor like we are, but I guess it's the same for a supplier, for a manufacturer, or for a workshop network. For sure, our position that is unrivaled, at least in Europe, made our life a little bit easier, because we could really develop strong cooperation projects with our suppliers. But of course, the difficulties were there and are still there. Supply chain is heavily disrupted today.
Indeed, I think the press is full with reports about what's going on in the supply chain, and the pandemic was about to be overcome, but it's not with a new crisis, and it's just going ahead, and even with a worse situation. With that, in parallel, we have now this shift to more electric vehicles, either hybrids or fully electrified battery electric vehicles. With that perspective, Ruggero, how do you see the aftermarket until 2025? Do you see it as positive than projected by Roland Berger? And how do you prepare for the time after?
Yes, we share absolutely the view of Roland Berger about a positive trend in the coming years, 25, we think even beyond. It means we have some time, but we have also to prepare us not to waste this time. And we are acting on 3 levels, short, medium, and long term. I would say that the key word is diversification, and probably is a message also for all the players, even for the workshops, to diversify their approach to the market. For us, diversification means to focus also on product lines already launched in the aftermarket for less impacted areas of the car, like chassis we just introduced in our range, wheel bearings, steering and suspension. Looking at new customers, at new segments, we are strongly growing into the segment of the e-bikes, e-scooters. We are in OE on an important application for scooters. It also refocusing on our history in the industrial world, where power transmission plays also an important role. In the long term, specifically on the electrification, we just started a strategic partnership with the company Nuvera, specialized in fuel cell engines, zero emissions. that leads us also to increase our experience and our know-how in the new coming market. And always in the technology of the car of the future, power transmissions will appear in many other functions beside the today powertrain. Take an example, power suspension is an area where also our products will play a role. So diversification is for me the main message.
Okay, this means a clear review of the portfolio and a clear look into the reason to exist and to work on that diversification. Very clear message here. On the other side, workshops. When is the right time to prepare them for battery electric vehicles? What does this mean for investments? Where do we get the people from which work on battery electric cars? What is your thought on that, Olivier?
Well, I think the time is probably now. We have seen that the IAM will still have some time looking at the next 5 years before they really see a lot of electric vehicles in their workshops. But you need to be prepared. It's obviously training to start with about the technology, but also the safety side, because electric vehicles, we know, on high tensions, you really need to operate in a correct manner to preserve yourself. But in the end, I think the workshop chains, the independent workshops, have been through all the technical evolution in the past with success. Electric vehicles might also be an opportunity to extend your service with charging columns and trying to offer the full package to the workshops. But I think the real message for them is, if you didn't do it yet, start now.
Okay, clear message. On the wholesale side, Ferdinando, how does LKQ prepare for the electric powertrains? Portfolio is a keyword. Yes. Technical assistance, how does this look like?
Thank you, Frank. Yes, absolutely, this is a priority for us. So LKQ wants to be the first to market in electrification, and we are already working really hard on that. And this leads me back to one of my initial statements. That means you need to be holistic today. And this is the typical example where the solution can only be holistic. It's not about parts, it's not about service, it's not about supply chain, it's the blend of everything together. So what we are going to face in the next future, I suppose more in the medium term than in the short term, as by the way Roland Berger confirmed, is something completely new. We need to rethink and to redesign. It's about parts, but first of all, it's about a certification of the workshops. We don't have to forget that there is a high voltage issue, and we need to prepare the people because it's life-threatening. We need to imagine how the request and the demand for those products will happen, because these products will have much lower volumes, much lower predictability, probably a much higher average value. So even the way we as wholesalers are distributing parts today must change. We can't have any more what we had in the past with the big central warehouses and the branches, because branch profiling will get impossible in this new environment. So we really need to have a fully holistic view on that, but absolutely this is priority for us.
And this holistic view, does this include also suppliers? What are your expectations here to suppliers? Are they part of this view?
It's a system, absolutely. Suppliers are key in this endeavor, because they have the data and the OE know-how that we need, and with us they can have the immediate contact with over 100,000 workshops. So I think this is the perfect synergy in this type of projects.
Yeah, this takes me now to the topic independent aftermarket versus the authorized channel. I think both channels make preparations. Both channels try to get as much business as possible in the future. Roland Berger laid out here, it will shift even a little bit more to the authorized channel in the next years before it goes into a opposite trend. The driver is clear. This is aging car park, which favors the IAM. Ruggero, do you see the overall market development in the same way, or how do you see the independent aftermarket developing here?
For sure, is a huge challenge. But Frank, we reminded at the beginning our history at Bosch more than 30 years ago, and probably the question was exactly the same. How will the aftermarket manage the change in complexity, the longer life of the parts, how will impact the volumes? And today we are here celebrating, I think, a vital, a strong market trend. The aftermarket has resources that only who doesn't know it cannot see. Imagine that now a catalog in aftermarket is more than 1 million parts. In the morning, the majority of the workshops don't know which kind of car will enter their workshop, which kind of reparation they will have to face, but they will do it. And behind that, there is a network of distributors able to provide all these parts. This proves a capacity to react, to adapt, that I doubt exists also in the OES. And for me, it brings me to be optimistic to the reaction of the aftermarket also in that direction. They will do it. Of course, it will be tough, it will be selection, it will need training, but it will arrive. One important point is to have clear rules and open rules. There is a strong power behind the aftermarket. This is why aftermarket exists. Without aftermarket, the power will be only in the hands of the car producer, and the end user will be in their hands. And this is neither ethical nor economical. That's why I strongly support your activities, FGF activities, to protect the opening to the data to all the players. And then with these rules, the aftermarket will have a very strong history in the future. This is my optimistic view.
I'm fighting for the same target in Brussels with my colleagues at CLEPA and at FGF. Yeah, I can only underline this. Independent aftermarket needs support from legislator, but there is also homework which we have to do on all levels, at distributors, at workshop level, and at supplier level. And without these joint forces, I think we will not manage this technical complexity in the future. But this takes me now to Ferdinando. How does LKQ see that? What preparations are made by your company to even strengthen the independent aftermarket in future?
Yes, for sure, I agree with Ruggero. So the independent aftermarket proved in the past to be very, very well equipped to face new challenges because it's agile by definition, has a very high service orientation, flexibility, quick reactions. Where we failed as an industry very often was always about creating a system. So having this holistic view and working together. The new challenges that are coming now requires this improvement. So what LKQ wants to do and is already doing is really to create a close partnership with our loyal customers on one hand and our reliable suppliers on the other hand, really working on the end-to-end process to reinforce the independent aftermarket. Means having a full cooperation in terms of data, in terms of technical know-how, in terms of training for workshops, in terms of cooperative supply chain management. So only the end-to-end cooperation, ranging from the manufacturers to the final installers with the added value of the distributors in between, can bring us in the right position to succeed in the future. For instance, in these days here at Autopromotech, LKQ is launching the new training platform called LKQ Academy in Italy for the first time. And this is an additional effort where we are really gathering and collecting all pan-European experience, the huge contribution we are getting from this perspective from our partner suppliers and delivering it to our most loyal customers. We really need to support them in these challenges.
Okay, very good to see that these preparations are made already and seen very clearly. Olivier, what makes independent multi-brand garages competitive to OEMs? How do you see the independent market? Do you see it as attractive as Roland Berger did?
Yeah, I guess, and the fact that Renault has invested so early and actually 2 years ago created a dedicated business unit for the IAM really proves it. What makes independent workshops attractive? I think the flexibility, the accessibility, both in terms of geography and value for money, and the trust. I think when you go to an independent workshop, it's really the guy next door that you can trust, and once you build that relationship, usually customers are very, very loyal to their workshops. So I think that's where the magic stands, and I think that's why the trend has been going from OE IAM being 50-50 20 years ago, and now almost 70% in the coming years. That will not stop, most probably.
Okay, very enthusiastic, optimistic view on that. Okay, let's close that chapter here a little bit, and I think we can't avoid it to have a closer look to the supply chain, because this is really hitting us at the moment, and EBIT margins at suppliers are declining. We are now somehow trapped. I get personally a lot of calls from suppliers asking CLEPA for help, and we are at the moment developing ideas to help suppliers more than only with lobbying. And we know that there is a distress in the industry. Sergio, how does Metelli see the current situation in OE, but also for the independent aftermarket?
We have to talk about volumes and margins, which are different. As far as the independent aftermarket is concerned, our turnover has been improving last year and is improving even this year, even if now with the war we are being affected by the sales in some countries, but we cannot complain. The volume are improving. On the OEM side, we have been suffering in the year 2020, last year, and even this year, the volume are below our expectation and will be not easy for the coming month, as we have seen in the presentation. So it will be difficult to recover the volume in the OEM side in the coming month. And this is worsening in terms of margins, because when you don't have volume, it is difficult to go ahead with your fixed cost that you have foreseen for those projects. So fortunately, we are more orientated to the independent aftermarket, which is compensating what we are leaving on the ground as far as the margin on the OEM side is concerned. Cost base, it is totally out of any control. We have just started our own foundry, aluminum die casting foundry 2 years ago. You can imagine the price of the gas, it is 5-fold what it was 6 months ago. It was totally crazy. I don't want to mention all the other components of our spare parts, which is out of control. We are daily in contact with our aftermarket and OEM customer in order to compensate partially the increase of the cost, but it will be not in the right time and the right dimension of the cost, which is even difficult to fine-tune. But we are in contact daily, so we are, and I would say that the customer, either aftermarket and OEM, they understand, so they try to help us and to follow this path. Internally, we are working in the synergies among our 8 manufacturing plants in order to concentrate the production as much as possible, to concentrate the fixed cost as much as possible in order to keep controlled what we can control. Yeah. Because raw material, you can hedge for some months, but you cannot control for longer period, and not in these days. need the supply chain. We are setting up a joint venture in Far East in order to control better the supply chain, which is coming directly or indirectly from Asia. Also because when you buy some components in Europe, at the end, the raw material is coming anyway from China. So everything is related to what is manufactured, the source, or produced in that part of the world. And we are setting up a company in order to produce locally our product there, but nowadays more to control, to have under better control the supply chain. But when there are the shutdown that we are experiencing in the last weeks, it is difficult to fine tune. Fortunately, we have a very high level of inventory, so we can face up, but these are tough days.
I can imagine, and I got the calls very often, and this was one voice of the supplier here, Ruggero. Maybe another voice from a supplier side. I think it's out of question. Cost increases can no longer be compensated by productivity gains. Do we need to rethink the compensation scheme and the price finding mechanisms in our market?
Difficult to add something to what Sergio just mentioned. Of course, we have to improve our processes. It's a duty and it's always possible. And today we have also to consider that the geopolitical situation is changing dramatically. What was sourcing low-cost countries is changing. Today we have to prioritize countries which can deliver in a proper time, and this of course does not help to reduce further costs. And at the same time, the cost increase of energy, of everything, is so coming strong that all action we can put in place are not compensating it. And we have the only solution. Unfortunately, there is not so much to rethink about pricing, but we have to downstream these price increases until the end user. Okay, today we are aftermarket. We are speaking about aftermarket, but of course the question is much bigger, and it enters in all our families outside what is only aftermarket. The inflation is coming in a wave that will impact us in a much larger way.
Okay, this takes me to passing to Ferdinando. LKQ has at least the possibility to adapt prices because you are selling to the final consumer. How do you deal with the latest cost inflation? Do you pass downstream all and everything?
Yes, for sure, inflation is skyrocketing and is becoming a major issue in our industry, but not only in our industry. So, on one hand, Frank, we have a great opportunity at LKQ that are the synergies, and so we are really looking for additional productivity. If you know our history, after a short but very hectic M&A period when we acquired 78 different legal entities, we decided at the end of 2018 to stop, or better said, to freeze this approach and to look for consolidation. And so we started our program called One LKQ Europe, aimed to completely centralize and blend the activities. So today LKQ has European centralized strategic leadership and strong regional execution. And this allowed really important productivities, and we think it's our duty towards our customers really to try to extract costs from this supply chain. From the independent aftermarket supply chain. And there is much more to come, because we think that in a very close cooperation with manufacturers, we can further streamline the supply chain and extract further costs for the benefit of our customers and basically our end consumers. On the other hand, it's absolutely not possible to buffer everything in this way. So very often we are compelled to pass on to customers the price increases we are getting from suppliers. And I'm not only referring to product suppliers, but I'm referring to indirect suppliers as well. So LKQ is buying something like 700 million of services and goods we need simply to maintain our operations alive. And this SG&A inflation today, like the energy costs that Sergio mentioned before, it's really overwhelming. And there is a very likelihood that we will need, even in the future, to pass on to end consumer part of this inflation.
Okay, it's a mixed strategy out of own productivity
and passing on
consolidation gains, and then partly also downstream. Downstream, keyword. You are sitting at the very end of the supply chain. Your network charges to the consumer. Do you see there a lot of room for, or will this drive consumers into e-commerce or whatever is their available channel to get more affordable repairs?
Yeah, you're right. End of the stream. So at the end, and very small organization, so there is probably little room for productivity increase. In the end, when you're a workshop, you sell €1 of labor and €2 of spare parts. And spare parts you buy from our colleagues over there. So the price that you get, that's what you need to put back to the consumer in the end. So I think they will reverse the extra cost to the consumer inevitably. What will happen on the consumer side? So I think that will increase, as I mentioned earlier, even more the attractiveness of independent workshops. Probably some consumers might wait a bit more before they do the maintenance if they need to save some money. So the mileage between two services could increase. On the question related to the e-commerce and the internet, so I don't think there will be an explosion of the do-it-yourself activity. But what I see as a bigger challenge for the workshop financials is the arrival of new business models. So I mentioned earlier that as the key challenge, at any time potentially new entrants could disrupt completely the market. And my advice to a workshop, and that will really be to really look into your financials and make sure that you make profit on the right areas. What I mean here is, if one day with new business models you lose the steering and the control of the spare parts and you only make money on labor, especially in Italy where there is the bad habit of making money on spare parts and almost nothing on labor, once you're left only with labor, you're really in deep trouble. So get some financial educations and have a thorough screening of your P&L statement and structure.
Okay, very good recommendation here. Yeah? Yeah, this takes us to the last session here, and I really want to keep it short. New market entrants, I think we heard a lot. Roland Berger was clear about what is about to come. Question to Sergio. E-commerce platforms are offering at the moment more and more repair solutions. There are a couple of famous ones in the UK, and they act in between an owner of a car and a repairer. Are collaboration models with such platforms, or potentially directly with fleets, a solution and a viable option for suppliers?
Let's say that from the university, the theory says that in a perfect system, there are few possibility of new entrants, but the independent aftermarket probably is not so perfect from one side. Let's take the example, at least of the Italian independent aftermarket chain of distribution is very long. Manufacturer, distributor, retailer, garage, and user. And in a lot of cases, they are separate and they don't have maybe a long-term approach and just a quarterly or yearly approach. And this is not, this doesn't create a perfect, or let's say, an effective environment. But on the other side, there are somebody who in this not effective sector, they are creating new service, new way of providing spare parts, repair and maintenance. So we have to take in consideration even the fact that Amazon and the e-commerce provider, they are trying to create a different way to supply the service. But I would say the less complicated is the spare parts and the repair, and the less synergies there are among the supply chain, the more probability that there are for new entrants. And I would suggest, but we are, as I said, a family company, we cannot drive the world, we can follow at least, to take a long-term decision and a strategic decision in order to be more effective from one side. From the other side, we as manufacturer, we have to be the best in class to provide all the service which is needed, because anyway, somebody has to produce the spare parts, and the spare parts for the aftermarket, which are different from the genuine one, because if we consider the average age of the car park, which is 11 years and growing, we know that we have to produce the spare parts which are good fit for those cars, so we have to invest in technology for those type of spare parts. So we have to do our job at the best way, and to try to keep in contact with the distribution, and to try to take long-term decision together with them in order to be effective. And we have to accept the new entrants, because for sure we will have to deal with them.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Maybe one last question to Ferdinando. LKQ operates an own e-commerce platform. I think you have one in UK, ECP runs one. How do you manage this e-commerce parallel to the traditional channel? Is that the model of the future? A wholesaler follows to be here omni-channel present?
For sure, the future of the independent aftermarket is an omni-channel future. Although I think that the big B2C specialists like Mr. Morzenti mentioned in his presentation, like Amazon, like others, are really addressing a slightly different type of customers, because they are more focused on price-conscious end consumers, while our channel is much more professional-oriented, even when we are B2C. For sure, I consider it an opportunity, so getting more and more multi-channel. I'm not particularly scared by the competition of these giants. This increase, of course, the competitive pressure overall, and the competitive pressure is always beneficial to the end consumers. So everything what can be beneficial for the end consumers is absolutely welcome at LKQ. We need to understand how to differentiate our professional channel, and I think that one of the typical and historical assets we have, that is the delivery performance, can make the difference. So big distributors, well organized, can deliver workshops 5-6 times per day, what for sure won't be affordable for the e-commerce specialists in the future.
Okay, with that statement, I think we are at the end of that session. Thanks a lot to all the panelists here for sharing time, and also sharing their insights on challenges which are upcoming and definitely will change the aftermarket landscape in the next 5 years more than what we have seen in the last decade or even 2 decades. We would like to give you also the chance to raise one or the other question. Please raise your hands. You will get a microphone. Just state your name and company, and we will address it to one of the panelists here to give you an answer. Are there any questions? If not, then we can close this session today. Thanks a lot for coming to Autopromotech. Thanks a lot for being with us in that session here. Thanks a lot for listening. And I wish all of you a very successful show, the first in presence, and it's really good to meet again in person. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
So.